You've heard true crime before, but we promise, not quite like this. This is Dark Rainbows, where we tell the stories the world too often ignores. Real lives, real love, and sometimes devastating, real heartbreak. Tonight we look at two women whose lives ended in mystery and pain. Women who loved deeply, lived boldly, and may have been silenced for that very love. In the small city of McKeesport, Pennsylvania, nestled along the Monongahela River, communities are built on connection and familiarity. It was here that 32-year-old Aaliyah Johnson had built her life. As a black trans woman, she navigated the world with a spirit that her friends and family remember as a source of light and laughter. She wasn't just a neighbor, she was a confidant, the person you called for advice or just to hear a funny story. Those who loved her described a woman who was fiercely loyal and deeply kind, someone who would go out of her way to support others, often placing their needs before her own. Her presence was a constant, a reliable source of warmth in their lives. But in the spring of 2020, that light was abruptly and confusingly extinguished. On the evening of May 26, 2020, a call was made to emergency services. Aaliyah was found on the ground outside her apartment complex in Crawford Village. She was unresponsive. The scene was one of quiet chaos, the flashing lights of first responders cutting through the darkness, leaving neighbors and loved ones with a sudden, terrifying void. In the days that followed, the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office released its finding. The official cause of death was ruled a suicide, resulting from blunt impact injuries to her head and neck, consistent with a fall from the third floor of her apartment building. For the authorities, the case was seemingly straightforward, and it was quickly closed. But for Aaliyah's family and friends, this conclusion was not just painful, it was impossible to believe. The woman they knew, the one who was making plans for the future and who, despite any struggles, held on to hope, would not have chosen to end her life. Their grief was immediately compounded by a wave of urgent, unanswered questions. They believed the authorities had missed or ignored a bigger, more sinister picture. Their skepticism was rooted in stark, physical evidence they say was overlooked. For years, Aaliyah had lived with a broken apartment door. It didn't lock properly, a fact she had reportedly complained about to building management multiple times. It was a constant source of anxiety, leaving her perpetually vulnerable. Adding to this, a window in her apartment was cracked. These weren't just minor damages, they were critical security failures, entry points that wouldn't require forced entry for an intruder to gain access. Even more alarming were the threats. In the weeks leading up to her death, Aaliyah had confided in her loved ones that she was being harassed and had been receiving threats. She was scared. This crucial context, a clear indicator of potential danger from an outside party, seemed to be entirely absent from the official investigation. To her family, the narrative of suicide felt like a convenient story that ignored Aaliyah's own expressed fears for her life. Nothing about her death made sense. Fueled by grief and a profound sense of injustice, Aaliyah's community refused to let her be forgotten or her death be dismissed. Her case emerged at a volatile moment in American history, just one day after the murder of George Floyd, when protests against systemic racism and police brutality were erupting nationwide. Aaliyah's name quickly became a rallying cry, a powerful reminder that the call for justice must include Black transgender people. Days after her death, protesters took to the streets of McKeesport. They marched to the police department, their voices echoing with chants for justice, demanding that the authorities do what they felt had not been done: conduct a real investigation. At the forefront of this movement was Aaliyah's mother, Tanya Reed. Her pain was visible, but her resolve was unbreakable. She held a simple handmade sign that read, "Do your job." It was a mother's desperate plea for accountability, a demand that her child's life be treated with the dignity and seriousness it deserved. Despite the public outcry and the family's pleas, the official stance has not changed. Authorities maintain that Aaliyah was alone on the night she died, citing a lack of surveillance footage showing anyone entering or exiting her apartment. But her loved ones counter that with a broken door. No one would have needed to force their way in. The silence from investigators in the years since has been deafening. The unresolved circumstances leave behind a series of haunting questions. When a black trans woman expresses fear for her life, is her voice heard? When evidence of her vulnerability is present, is it taken seriously? The official record tells one story, but the memory of Aaliyah and the fight of her community tell another. It's a story that asks not just what happened on that night in May, but whether a system designed to protect its citizens chose to look away, dismissing Aaliyah's voice before anyone truly listened. Hundreds of miles away from the cold winter of Pennsylvania, as the seasons began to turn, another woman's story was unfolding in the gentler climate of North Carolina. The two cases were separated by distance, yet bound by a common thread of unanswered questions and families left grappling with an unbearable void. This story is about a life that seemed to shine so brightly, it was impossible to imagine it being extinguished. 33-year-old Amber Shelton was a beloved figure in her Greensboro community. Known for a laugh that could fill a room and a fierce loyalty to her friends and family, her absence was felt almost immediately. On December 9, 2024, the rhythm of daily life was broken. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. Texts, usually answered within minutes, were met with a deafening silence, marked only by the cold, digital confirmation of "delivered." When she failed to show up for a planned family dinner, a knot of anxiety tightened into genuine fear. That evening, her family officially reported her missing, setting in motion a search that would stretch through the longest, darkest nights of winter. For the next 3 agonizing months, Amber's face was everywhere and nowhere at once. Her smiling picture was pinned to bulletin boards in coffee shops and community centers, shared thousands of times across social media platforms. Friends and volunteers organized search parties, combing through local parks and wooded areas, their hope a fragile shield against the creeping dread. Every lead was a potential breakthrough, every dead end a fresh wave of despair. Her family existed in a state of suspended animation, caught between the desperate prayer that she would walk through the door and the terrifying possibility that she never would. The holidays passed in a blur of forced smiles and hollow traditions, each one a painful reminder of the empty chair at their table. Then, in early March of 2025, as the first signs of spring began to emerge, their worst fears became a devastating reality. A visitor to the Greensboro Arboretum, a sprawling sanctuary of manicured gardens and tranquil walking paths, made a grim discovery in a secluded area. The park, a place people sought for peace and reflection, was suddenly cordoned off with yellow tape. The quiet beauty of the landscape was shattered by the somber presence of law enforcement, its winding paths transformed into a crime scene. For Amber's family, the news was a final, brutal end to their search. The place that once held the promise of natural beauty would forever hold the unbearable memory of their loss. In the days that followed, the official process began. The medical examiner's report provided a clinical, heartbreaking answer to one question. The cause of death was a single gunshot wound. With this information, and based on evidence they reported finding at the scene, the Greensboro Police Department concluded their investigation. The case was closed, and Amber Shelton's death was officially ruled a suicide. But for the people who truly knew Amber, this official conclusion didn't bring closure. It felt hollow, a simplistic answer to a complex and vibrant life. This was a woman, they said, who met challenges head-on. Her friends remember her infectious humor, her ability to find light in the darkest of situations. She was resilient, a fighter who had overcome personal struggles in the past and had seemed to be in a good place. She was making plans, talking about a trip she wanted to take in the summer, excited about a new project at work. The portrait of Amber painted by her loved ones stood in stark, painful contrast to the official narrative. They couldn't reconcile the image of the Amber they knew, the one who fought so hard for her happiness and for the people she loved, with the idea of someone giving up without a word. There were no warning signs they could see, no final, desperate calls for help. There was no note left behind to explain the unexplainable, only a void where her vibrant presence used to be. How could the woman who was the first to offer a shoulder to cry on, the one who insisted that "this too shall pass," be gone without so much as a whisper of goodbye? Her death left a trail of unanswered questions that continue to haunt her family. They wonder about the details of the investigation, about evidence that may have been overlooked, about the final hours of her life. The official ruling, meant to be an endpoint, instead became the start of a new private investigation fueled by grief and doubt. The whispers about what really happened persist, not out of a desire for conspiracy, but from a deep, loving refusal to accept that the story is over. It forces us to confront a difficult duality. Was Amber a master of hiding a profound struggle, her bright smile a mask for a pain no one could see? Or, in a world that often fails to listen, did a silence surround her when she needed help the most, leaving the full truth of her story buried with her in that quiet park? Aaliyah Johnson, Amber Shelton, two women, two different lives, both remembered for their strength, their love, and their light. Their stories remind us that love, when twisted by fear, neglect, or silence, can become deadly, and that every life, every voice, deserves to be heard, respected, and honored. The stories of Aaliyah and Amber are a painful reminder of the darkness that can exist. But in their memory, we can choose to bring light. If you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of despair or isolation, please know you are not alone. Reaching out is an act of profound courage, a step towards healing. Don't suffer in silence. For immediate, confidential support, you can call or text 988 to connect with the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Trained, compassionate counselors are available 24/7 to listen without judgment and help you through any crisis, big or small. Help is just a call or text away. For young people in the LGBTQ+ community seeking a safe and affirming space, the Trevor Project offers life-saving resources. They provide crisis intervention and suicide prevention services, creating a community of support where you can find understanding and acceptance. The shadows of abuse can feel inescapable. If you or someone you love is facing domestic or partner violence, especially within the LGBTQ+ community, the network Lay Red offers a confidential lifeline. Call them at 800-832-1901 for safety planning, housing resources, and survivor-led support. We honor Aaliyah and Amber when we say their names and share their stories. Each act of remembrance is a promise to fight for a world where everyone is safe, seen, and cherished. Let their legacy be one of action and compassion. Because while silence kills, our collective voice in remembrance and support has the power to save lives.